He asked me to be his fiancée for a weekend for $50,000. I said yes, not knowing that simple word would unravel my entire life, pull me into a billion-dollar fraud, and almost cost me everything I held dear, transforming me from an ambitious executive assistant into a national pariah overnight, only to rise from the ashes forged by betrayal. My name is Angelina Wright, and at 28, my life in Manhattan was a delicate balance, a constant tightrope walk between ambition and obligation. Meridian Capital Group, a beacon of private equity on the city skyline, had been my world for 3 intense years. I was executive assistant to Nathan Blackwell, the charismatic, self-made billionaire CEO, a man who, at 42, commanded a $2.8 billion empire, built on what I then believed was sheer genius and unwavering integrity. My days were a blur of 70-hour weeks, fueled by lukewarm coffee and the electric hum of ambition that vibrated through the company's polished corridors. I made $78,000 annually, good money by most standards, but barely a lifeline. My modest 400-square-foot studio in Queens was a small sanctuary, yet its walls felt thin against the mounting weight of my mother's medical bills. Patricia, my amazing mom, a former public school teacher and the bedrock of my Bronx upbringing, was battling stage 3 breast cancer, and her experimental treatment, the one promising a glimmer of real hope, cost $45,000 out of pocket. Every extra dollar I earned, every frugal choice I made, went towards that impossible sum, leaving me perpetually teetering on the edge of financial exhaustion. I had always admired Nathan. He was a force, a man whose presence filled a room, whose eyes seemed to hold the secrets of the financial universe. He spoke with a captivating blend of confidence and vision, and his philanthropic endeavors were often highlighted in glossy magazines, painting him as a titan of industry with a heart of gold. I'd seen him charm investors, command boardrooms, and navigate complex deals with effortless grace. To me, he was the embodiment of the American dream, living proof that hard work and intellect could elevate you from nothing to everything. I trusted him implicitly, believed in his mission, and saw my own relentless work ethic as a stepping stone within his illustrious organization. That trust, I would soon discover, was a carefully cultivated illusion, a weapon sharpened against my very vulnerabilities, and the thought of it still sends a chill down my spine. It was October 2022, a brisk autumn afternoon, when Nathan pulled me aside. The air in his opulent corner office, usually filled with the hushed click of keyboards and the low murmur of important calls, suddenly felt heavy, charged with an unfamiliar energy. He leaned back in his leather chair, a faint smile playing on his lips, his gaze surprisingly direct. "Angelina," he began, his voice smooth as aged whiskey, "I have an unusual request. A highly sensitive, highly important situation, and I need your absolute discretion." My heart gave an anxious flutter. Unusual requests from Nathan usually meant late nights or impossible deadlines, but his tone, uncharacteristically solicitous, suggested something entirely different. He explained it was for a critical investor weekend in the Hamptons, a gathering that would secure a $400 million fund commitment, a deal that would catapult Meridian to new heights. "My investors are traditional," he confided, his voice dropping slightly. "From Dubai. They value stability, family men. They need to see a committed partner by my side. For this weekend, Angelina, I need you to pretend to be my fiancée." The words hung in the air, absurd, unbelievable, yet utterly compelling, and the hum of the office seemed to fade into a distant drone as my world narrowed to his gaze. My mind reeled. A fake fiancé? Me? The concept felt ludicrous, like something out of a bad romantic comedy. I stammered, searching for words, for a logical explanation. Nathan held up a hand. "I understand this is unconventional, but it's crucial, and I'm prepared to make it worth your while. $50,000, cash, by Monday morning." $50,000. The number hit me like a physical blow, a shimmering beacon in the darkness of my financial despair. It was almost exactly what I needed for my mother's experimental treatment, the very sum I'd been agonizing over for months. My initial shock quickly morphed into a desperate calculation. Could I do it? Was it truly harmless? The thought of my mother, her frail hands, her unwavering hope, flashed before my eyes. This wasn't about impressing Nathan or Meridian. It was about saving my mother, and the moral quandary felt suffocating. yet the answer was already forming on my tongue, driven by a love stronger than any ethical qualm. I'll do it, I heard myself say, the words feeling foreign and heavy as they left my lips, sealing a pact I could never have imagined. The next 48 hours were a blur of frantic preparations. Nathan's personal assistant, a stern woman named Sylvia who rarely spoke above a whisper, handed me a small velvet box. Inside, a dazzling Cartier engagement ring, heavy and cold on my finger, seemed to pulse with a borrowed brilliance, a symbol of the elaborate charade I was about to embark on. My meager wardrobe was replaced with a selection of designer gowns, each one fitting perfectly, tailored overnight by an unseen army of seamstresses, their silks and satins feeling alien against my skin. Nathan provided a crash course in fiancé etiquette. How to hold his arm, how to laugh at his jokes, the subtle cues of affection, the perfectly crafted backstory of our whirlwind romance, all meticulously rehearsed until it felt sickeningly natural. He emphasized the importance of traditional values, subtly guiding me to speak of future children and shared dreams, painting a picture of domestic bliss, a stark contrast to the sterile efficiency of my actual life. And a cold dread began to settle in my stomach as the lines between reality and performance blurred. The Hamptons estate was breathtaking, an $8.7 million monument to wealth, nestled against a backdrop of stormy autumn ocean views. The air was crisp, carrying the salty tang of the sea, mixing strangely with the scent of expensive cigars and the floral notes of Sylvia's elaborate centerpieces. The Arab investors from Dubai arrived, impeccably dressed and intensely scrutinizing, their gazes lingering on me, assessing the woman Nathan had presented as his future. I played the part of the devoted fiancée with a desperate conviction. Every smile, every touch, every carefully chosen word, a performance designed to secure my mother's future. I laughed at Nathan's stories of humble beginnings and daring deals, my voice light and tinkling, though my heart felt heavy and cold. I spoke of family, of community, of the quiet joys of building a life together, all the while knowing it was a fabrication, a gilded cage of lies, and the borrowed Cartier ring seemed to burn against my skin, a constant reminder of the Faustian bargain I'd made. The investors, conservative and observant, seemed charmed by my apparent sincerity, my earnestness, a stark contrast to the often cynical world of high finance. They appreciated my traditional values, my gentle nods of agreement, my deferential gaze toward Nathan. I saw their guarded expressions soften, their rigid postures relax, and a sense of uneasy triumph began to bloom within me. By Sunday, the air was electric with success. The commitment letter, a document signifying a $400 million fund investment, was signed. Nathan was elated, his smile genuine, expansive. He pulled me aside, his hand briefly resting on my back, a gesture that now feels like a physical violation. "You were magnificent, Angelina," he murmured, his eyes alight with triumph. "Absolutely magnificent." Later that evening, in a secluded corner of the sprawling estate, he handed me a thick envelope filled with crisp $100 bills. $50,000, in cash. It felt illicit, almost dirty, but the relief that washed over me was intoxicating, overwhelming all other sensations as I clutched the envelope like a precious treasure, knowing my mother now had a chance. I returned to Queens exhausted but with a profound sense of accomplishment. The next morning, the first thing I did was wire $45,000 to Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center, the transaction feeling like a sacred ritual, a lifeline thrown. My mother would get her treatment. Her future, however precarious, was now a little brighter because of me. I had kept my end of the bargain, and now I could breathe, truly breathe, for the first time in months. The Hamptons weekend, with its dizzying opulence and carefully constructed lies, already felt like a distant, unsettling dream, a necessary evil I was eager to forget, to bury deep beneath the mundane rhythms of my actual life. I went back to my 70-hour weeks, my modest studio, my carefully budgeted existence, believing the nightmare was over, unaware that the real nightmare was just beginning, silently gathering strength to shatter my life into a million pieces. 3 weeks later, on November 7, 2022, the world I had so carefully rebuilt imploded. The harsh glare of my alarm clock read 6 a.m. when a thunderous pounding rattled my apartment door, echoing through the thin walls of my building. My heart leaped into my throat. Who could it be? Before I could even fully register the fear, a male voice boomed, "FBI, open up!" Disoriented, still half asleep, I fumbled with the locks. The door burst inward, revealing a phalanx of agents, their faces grim, their vests emblazoned with FBI, their hands already moving to secure the apartment. The cold metal of a search warrant was shoved into my trembling hand, its stark black print swimming before my eyes. They moved with chilling efficiency, their flashlights cutting through the pre-dawn gloom, their voices curt, authoritative, and the air filled with the metallic tang of fear, a smell that would forever be seared into my memory. "Angelina Wright, you're being detained as a material witness in the Meridian Capital fraud investigation. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you." The words echoed through my fog of terror. Fraud? Meridian? I was escorted, still in my pajamas, to a black SUV, the cold morning air biting against my skin, the curious stares of neighbors burning into me, their judgment palpable, and the city, my city, suddenly felt alien and hostile. The interrogation room at 26 Federal Plaza was stark, fluorescent lights casting harsh shadows. Special Agent Ramirez, a middle-aged woman with piercing eyes, sat across from me, her gaze unwavering, unforgiving. On the table between us lay a mountain of documents, photos, bank statements, and to my absolute horror, photos from the Hamptons weekend. Me, smiling, clinging to Nathan's arm, the fake engagement ring glinting in the sunlight, a damning testament to my complicity, my apparent guilt. "Ms. Wright," Agent Ramirez began, her voice flat, clinical, devoid of sympathy, "Nathan Blackwell is under investigation for operating a $1.4 billion Ponzi scheme. Meridian Capital has been defrauding investors for 8 years. You were seen accompanying him to the Dubai investor weekend in the Hamptons. You posed as his fiancée. We need to know everything." My mind reeled. Ponzi scheme? $1.4 billion? It was incomprehensible, a nightmare of staggering proportions. I tried to explain, my voice cracking, my words tumbling out in a frantic rush. I told them about the weekend, the $50,000, my mother's cancer treatment, the desperate need that had driven me to agree. I insisted I'd known nothing about Meridian's operations, that I'd been merely an assistant, a pawn, a desperate woman trying to save her mother. Agent Ramirez listened, her expression unchanging, her skepticism palpable. "So, you expect us to believe that Nathan Blackwell, a billionaire CEO, paid you $50,000 in cash just to play dress-up for a weekend? And you never questioned why?" Her words felt like a physical blow, and I realized, with a sickening dread, how damning my story sounded, how easily my desperation could be twisted into complicity. The news broke that same evening. Meridian Capital CEO arrested in $1.4 billion Ponzi scheme. Within hours, my name, Angelina Wright, was plastered across every major news outlet. CNN, Fox, MSNBC, The New York Post, all ran my photo. That photo from the Hamptons, smiling beside Nathan, the fake engagement ring a glaring symbol of my supposed involvement. Headlines screamed, "Billionaire's fiancé implicated in massive fraud. Executive assistant's role in Ponzi scheme under scrutiny." The fake fiancé, key player, or innocent victim? The narrative was swift, brutal, and utterly devastating. My phone exploded with messages, hundreds of missed calls from reporters, death threats from enraged investors who'd lost their life savings, and worst of all, silence from friends and former colleagues. A deafening void that spoke volumes about their judgment, their instant condemnation. I was fired from Meridian, not that I wanted to work there anymore, via a terse email, effective immediately, no severance, my career in tatters. My landlord, citing reputational concerns, issued a 30-day eviction notice. My bank account was frozen by federal order, leaving me unable to access even my meager savings. I was radioactive, a social pariah, my life disintegrating faster than I could comprehend, the weight of public scorn crushing me beneath its suffocating weight. My sister Maya, a schoolteacher with 2 young kids and her own struggles, was my only lifeline. She opened her cramped 2-bedroom apartment in the Bronx to me, her eyes filled with a mixture of pity and disbelief. Her husband's disapproving stares, a constant reminder of my fall from grace. My mother, Patricia, frail and battling cancer, was horrified, her illness worsening from the stress, her already pale face growing even more drawn, and the guilt, the crushing, suffocating guilt of having dragged her into this nightmare, was almost unbearable. I spent my days in a haze, scrolling through endless online vitriol, reading comment sections that called me a gold digger, a con artist, a willing participant in the ruin of thousands. Strangers on Twitter demanded I be jailed. Investors who'd lost everything posted my address online, inciting harassment. I received dozens of death threats daily, each one a fresh wound, a reminder of how far I had fallen, how utterly alone I was in this maelstrom of accusations. Desperate for legal help but unable to afford representation, I stumbled upon Legal Aid Society attorney Marcus Reed. Marcus, a black man in his late 40s with graying temples and a weary but kind face, took on my case pro bono, driven by a deep conviction that the system often crushed the vulnerable. In our first meeting in his cramped, cluttered office in Lower Manhattan, surrounded by stacks of case files and the faint smell of stale coffee, I broke down, tears streaming down my face as I recounted the entire sordid story. My mother's illness, Nathan's manipulation, the $50,000 that now felt like blood money. Marcus listened, his expression grave but attentive, his pen moving steadily across a legal pad. "Angelina," he said finally, his voice firm but gentle, "this isn't your fault. You were exploited. Nathan Blackwell used your desperation, your love for your mother, as a weapon. We're going to prove that." His words, simple and direct, were the first sliver of hope I'd felt in weeks. A lifeline thrown into the churning chaos of my life, and I clung to them with a desperation that bordered on faith. Marcus's strategy was methodical, surgical. He subpoenaed Nathan's internal communications, emails, and calendar records. What we uncovered was staggering. Nathan had explicitly instructed Sylvia, his personal assistant, to find a convincing fiancé type for the investor weekend. Someone traditional, non-threatening, preferably desperate for money so they won't ask questions. The emails, cold and calculated, outlined his plan to exploit an employee, to use them as a prop in his elaborate fraud. Marcus also found evidence that the $400 million from the Dubai investors was part of a larger scheme to prop up Meridian's failing Ponzi structure. A last-ditch effort to delay the inevitable collapse. My role, it became clear, wasn't just window dressing. It was a crucial element of Nathan's deception, designed to present an image of stability and family values to deeply traditional investors. A calculated move to extract their capital before the whole house of cards came tumbling down. The federal prosecutors, initially viewing me as a co-conspirator, began to shift their stance as Marcus presented this evidence. Lead prosecutor, Assistant U.S. Attorney Elena Vasquez, a sharp, no-nonsense woman, reviewed the communications in a tense meeting at the U.S. Attorney's office. Her expression hardened as she read Nathan's emails. "Miss Wright," she said, her voice measured, "it appears you were a victim of Nathan Blackwell's manipulation, not a willing participant. However, we still need your full cooperation. You were there. You witnessed the meetings. Your testimony is crucial to securing a conviction." I agreed without hesitation, my relief almost overwhelming. I would testify. I would tell the truth, no matter the cost, no matter how terrifying, because the truth, I realized, was the only weapon I had left. The only path to reclaiming my shattered life. My deposition took place over 3 grueling days in a sterile conference room, recorded by court stenographers and videographers. I recounted every detail of the Hamptons weekend, every conversation, every subtle interaction with the Dubai investors. I described Nathan's coaching, his emphasis on traditional values, his careful orchestration of the entire charade. The prosecutors pressed me relentlessly, testing for inconsistencies, for any hint of complicity, but I held firm, my voice unwavering, my resolve unshaken, because I had nothing left to lose, and the truth, raw and painful, was my only shield. The trial of Nathan Blackwell began in March 2023 at the U.S. District Court for the Southern District of New York. Judge Margaret Hollis presided, her demeanor stern and uncompromising, the courtroom packed with investors, journalists, and spectators hungry for justice. Nathan, dressed in an expensive suit, his face a mask of arrogant defiance, sat flanked by a team of high-priced defense attorneys, men and women whose polished shoes and designer briefcases screamed privilege and entitlement. I watched him from the witness stand, my heart pounding, my hands clammy, as the prosecutor called me to testify. The courtroom hushed, the weight of hundreds of gazes pressing down on me, and I took a deep breath, steadied myself, and began to speak. I testified for 6 hours, my voice breaking at times, my eyes welling with tears as I described my mother's illness, the $45,000 I desperately needed, the $50,000 Nathan had dangled like a carrot. I explained the Hamptons weekend, the fake engagement ring, the performance I'd been coerced into, the utter obliviousness I'd had to Nathan's crimes. Nathan's defense attorneys tried to discredit me, painting me as a willing accomplice, a gold digger who'd known exactly what she was doing. "Isn't it true, Miss Wright," one attorney sneered, "that you were thrilled to be on the arm of a billionaire? That you saw this as your big break?" I met his gaze steadily, my voice firm. "No," I said. "I saw it as a way to save my mother's life. I was desperate. Nathan Blackwell exploited that desperation. He used me." The jury, I could see, was moved, their expressions shifting from skepticism to sympathy, and in that moment, I knew I'd reclaimed a piece of my humanity, a fragment of the truth that had been so brutally distorted. The forensic accountants presented evidence of Meridian's Ponzi scheme. $1.4 billion in fabricated returns, falsified financial statements, fictitious offshore accounts. They traced the $400 million from the Dubai investors, showing how it had been used to pay off earlier investors, perpetuating the fraud. Nathan's defense crumbled. His claims of innocence, his insistence that Meridian was a legitimate business, were systematically dismantled, piece by piece. Investor after investor took the stand, their voices trembling with rage and grief as they described losing their life savings, their retirements, their children's college funds. The collective weight of their suffering, their shattered dreams, hung heavy in the courtroom, a palpable force that seemed to press down on Nathan, stripping away his arrogance, leaving him exposed and vulnerable. On May 15, 2023, after 12 days of deliberation, the jury returned its verdict. Nathan Blackwell was found guilty on all 47 counts: securities fraud, wire fraud, mail fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy. The courtroom erupted. Investors wept openly, their relief and vindication palpable. Nathan's face went ashen, his arrogant facade finally crumbling, revealing a man stripped of power, of control, of the illusion of invincibility. Judge Hollis sentenced him to 32 years in federal prison, the maximum sentence allowable, a stern rebuke for a crime of such magnitude. All his assets, his Manhattan penthouse, 12.3 million, his art collection, and his offshore accounts, $67 million, were forfeited. He was permanently banned from the securities industry, his empire reduced to rubble, and would face 5 years of supervised release after his prison term. The image of him, his face finally stripped of its arrogant mask, led away in handcuffs, filled me with a quiet, unyielding sense of justice, a feeling that finally, truly, the scales had balanced. The case became a national sensation. The New York Times ran a searing exposé, The Fake Fiancée, how a billionaire used his assistant to hide a Ponzi scheme. The Wall Street Journal, Bloomberg, CNN, and NBC Nightly News covered every detail. Initial coverage had portrayed me negatively, but the follow-up stories after my exoneration became viral redemption narratives, my face no longer a symbol of fraud but of resilience. My interview on 60 Minutes, in October 2023, garnered 8.4 million viewers, a powerful platform to share my truth, to explain the nuances of my exploitation. Nathan's LinkedIn and social media profiles were deleted, but archived screenshots circulated, showcasing his fake family man persona, now a grotesque reminder of his duplicity. Business Insider profiled him in 10 Most Shocking White-Collar Criminals of 2023, while Harvard Business Review featured my story, discussing employer exploitation and ethical pitfalls. My story, once a private nightmare, had become a public reckoning, a warning to others. My battle wasn't over. I filed a $25 million civil suit against Nathan for fraud, defamation, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and wrongful exploitation. In a separate legal victory, I won a stunning $8.7 million judgment, the exact value of his Southampton estate, which was seized and liquidated. With an additional $2.3 million in punitive damages, my total award reached $11 million. After attorney fees and taxes, I received $7.4 million, a staggering sum that represented not just money, but a complete reversal of fortune. A true reclamation of my life. I used the money carefully, purposefully. $400,000 went towards my mother's continued cancer treatment and care, ensuring she received the best possible medical attention without the crushing weight of financial anxiety. $200,000 repaid my sister Maya and all the friends who had supported me during my darkest hours, a tangible expression of gratitude. I then dedicated $1.5 million to establish the Second Chance Project, a nonprofit dedicated to providing free legal defense funds for employees wrongly accused in corporate fraud cases, a direct response to my own terrifying experience. I purchased a modest, comfortable home for my mother in the Bronx, a place where she could heal and live in peace, freed from the anxieties of her small, rented apartment. The remaining $3.3 million I invested conservatively, securing my future and providing a foundation for my ongoing advocacy work, a new chapter forged from the wreckage of the old. My case sparked a profound systemic change. The Angelina Wright Worker Protection Act, New York Labor Law Amendment A 8472, was passed in 2024, requiring written contracts for any personal appearances or role-playing by employees, mandating disclosure of business context and creating severe penalties for employer exploitation. The Second Chance Project quickly became a vital resource, helping 89 cases with 76 exonerations since 2023, a testament to the ongoing need for such protection. I enrolled in NYU Stern, completing my MBA from 2024-2026, driven by a desire to understand the very systems that had nearly destroyed me, to become an even more effective advocate. In 2025, my memoir, The Fake Fiancée, How I Survived Being Framed by My Billionaire Boss, became a New York Times bestseller, sharing my story with millions, transforming my personal nightmare into a source of strength and education. I now serve on the SEC's Investor Advisory Committee, advocating for stronger employee protections, and I speak at over 30 events annually, reaching more than 15,000 business students and professionals about ethics, exploitation, and resilience, turning my trauma into a powerful tool for change. Most importantly, I saved my mother's life. Patricia Wright's cancer is now in remission, her laughter once again filling our new home, her eyes shining with a serene joy that makes every struggle, every tear, every moment of despair utterly worth it. The fake Cartier ring, a symbol of my public humiliation, now felt like a distant nightmare, replaced by the profound, authentic weight of real impact. My hands, once trembling with fear, now held the microphone with unwavering confidence. My voice, once silenced by betrayal, now echoed with a message of hope and vigilance, a testament to the enduring power of truth in a world rife with deceit.